So hi all. So today we are going to discuss about the session called managing SCLinux. This is very much important because SCLinux is nothing but it's a security enhanced Linux. Okay. So let's go to the slides. Okay. So yeah. So SCLinux. Okay. So SCLinux. Why the first question comes in your mind? Okay. So why we need SCLinux? Okay. What is the point to learn about SCLinux in a Linux operating system? Okay. So why we have introduced SCLinux in almost all the versions? It's I think started from the version 6. Okay, and now it's still continuing. Okay, so SCLinux is mainly implemented for security purpose. This is why the SCLinux full form is Security Enhanced Linux. Okay, so SCLinux is a security enhanced to a Linux that allows a user and an administrator more control over which users and application can access which resources such as standard Linux access control, if you can talk about such as file mode, are modifiable by the users and the applications. Okay, suppose if you are installing a application called Apache Tomcat, okay, and if you want to give us permissions to a user, if you want to get a access control of some files, okay, or folders, okay, so in that case, SCLinux is more useful for your application, okay. It can be any application, it can be a Paytm application, it can be a phone pay application, so those applications required, you need to install JDK, right, on top of your whether it's a web server, whether it's application server, on top of that you are going to install your applications. Okay, so for that we require this SCLinux for your files and folders, or you can say directories. Now, whereas SCLinux is access control are determined by the policy. But here, if I talk about SCLinux, so it's more of a policy kind of a thing, okay, which is loaded on the system and not changeable by the careless users or misbehaving applications. See, so for everything, if I'll talk about in a layman language, we have set of rules, we have set of laws, okay. So as per our law, right? So we have created the laws. What these laws are there, or you can say rules are there, right? So whether you need to walk on the left side of the road, okay. So this law is already created. This rule is already created, okay, and you have to walk on the left side of the road. But now it's up to you whether you want to walk on the left side of the road or right side of the road, okay. So as per the, so it's like a policy, okay. Once a policy is created, correct, so it should not be changeable, or it should not be misbehaving by some application. It should not be taken care by some user. He can come and alter at any point of time, no. So if it's a policy is created, that will be a forever kind of a thing, okay. So every user has to stick with that policy. Now the second thing, where SCLinux is also adds finer granularity to access control. Instead of only being able to specify who can read, in the previous session, I have explained you about the in the file permission, you have read, write, and execute permission, right? If you remember. So SCLinux is also specify who can read, write, or execute a file. For example, SCLinux lets you to specify who can unlink, append only, and move a file, and so on. Okay. So SCLinux is allowing you to specify the access to many resources other than files as well, such as network resources and inter-process communication. Normally, we can say. Okay. Now, the third point for this SCLinux. Okay. So, SCLinux provides a flexible mandatory access control. SCLinux provide a flexibility of a mandatory access control that is called MAC system built into the Linux kernel. So you know about the it's mainly related to your kernel. Okay, under the standards Linux discretion access control. Okay, that is called DAC. Okay, an application or a process running as a user ID or a SUID. Correct. Every process or a every user is running with a unique identification, right? Unique ID number, right? That is called your UID. I have explained in the user and group administration. Has the user permission to objects such as files, sockets, and other processes. Running as a Mac kernel protects the system from malicious or flawed applications that can be damage or destroy the system. So this is how all 3 points you need to keep in mind for the security enhanced Linux. Now there are some very much important files in SCLinux which we need to keep remember. So what all this, so as you are aware that /etc directory is only for all the configuration files, so you need to remember. So these two files, it should be very much important if you talk about in term of SCLinux. Okay, so in the interviews also sometimes they'll ask you what is the, even if I'll talk about RHCSA exam, Red Hat Certified System Administrator, there also you need to set the security enhanced Linux. You need to change it to permissive mode. Okay, from enforcing mode to permissive mode, that I'll explain you in this session only later on. Anyways, but the configuration file which is involved for that one is /etc SCLinux config file will be there. Okay, so you need to remember if you want to make any changes related to SCLinux. Okay, so which is the configuration file called etc SCLinux config file, and the second file is called /etc sysconfig SCLinux. So let me show you this file. Okay, if I do cat /etc, okay, SCLinux, you can see config file. So here you can see it's clearly telling this file control the states of a SCLinux on a system, whether you want your SCLinux to be enforcing mode or whether you want your SCLinux to be in the permissible mode or whether you want your SCLinux to be in disabled mode. Getting my point, guys? Okay, so this is the thing we need to keep in mind. So which is the configuration file? This one. So this one. What is the second configuration file? The second configuration file is your /etc, okay, sysconfig and SCLinux. Okay, so if you can see, is there any difference between these two files? No, right? So both these files are same. What is, then why this file is there? What is the second file? So second file is nothing but contains a symbolic link to the actual configuration file, which is your /etc SCLinux config file. You remember in the very starting of the session I have explained you about the hard link and the soft link. So just do ll of which file, of this file, okay, and just see. So you can clearly see this file is a soft link created for the actual file, which is your /etc SCLinux config file. Okay, so it's a soft link file. Okay, so which is your soft link file? So /etc sysconfig SCLinux is your soft link file. So getting my point? So file is only one actual file is there, that is your /etc SCLinux config file. So if you delete this file, so the actual data will be lost, which I have already explained in the previous session. Okay, getting my point, guys? Now coming back to the point. So what all modes we can set it up for the SCLinux? This is very much important because this is one question straight away asked in the exam 200 in Red Hat Certified System Administrator exam. Okay, where they want you to set this by default permission. What is the default permission over here? It's an enforcing mode to permissive mode that you need to do in the exam itself. So which file you need to edit is /etc SCLinux config file, you need to add it. Okay, so what all modes are there in SCLinux is nothing but your enforcing mode, permissive mode, and disable mode. So let's understand what is this enforcing mode, what is this permissive mode, and what is this disabled mode. Okay, so there are three modes in which SCLinux can be at a time. So you cannot be all three these modes at the same time. You can be only one. Okay, either you can be in enforcing, either you can be in permissive, or either you can be in disabled mode. Okay, so if you want to know which command, we can come to know your system is at a particular point of a time. So get and force is the command. So you will come to know by default it is telling enforcing mode because it is set to enforcing mode in /etc SCLinux config file. This is the main file, actual file, correct, guys? So now, so enforcing mode is nothing but, so enforcing mode you to enable and enforce the SCLinux security policy on the system, denying access and logging action. So what you need to do is first thing is, because see, if your particular SCLinux is in enforcing mode, so you won't be able to access and you won't be able to do any login actions. Okay, so you'll be facing problem with that one. So what you need to do is you need to set it to this value to permissive mode. Okay, so what is permissive mode in SCLinux? So permissive mode is a similar to debugging mode. Okay, if you want to debug something, then it will be a permissive mode. So in permissive mode, SCLinux policies and rules are applied to subject and object, but actions, for example, access control denials, okay, are not affected. The biggest advantage of permissive mode is that the log files and the error messages are generated based on SCLinux policy implemented. So whatever policy you are going to implement, on the basis of that only it's going to generate the log and you can debug that one later on. Getting my point, guys? Now coming to the third point, that is your disabled mode. So what is the disabled mode? So SCLinux is turned off and no log and log message will be generated and stored. If you don't want any logs to be rotated, if you don't want any message to see, if you simply want that my SCLinux should be disabled, I don't need this SCLinux, so then go ahead and make this value to disabled. Okay, guys, so same thing you can see here also they have explained, correct, in the file itself, okay, in the SCLinux. Now coming coming to the point, okay, so how we can set it up these values. So first thing, the very basic command in SCLinux is this command. Okay, so now we are going to do the lab work, or you can say production work. So same way, production also we need to do it, production work. So see, the thing is in IT or corporate industry, I have been working in this IT industry more than 7 years. Okay, and what I saw there is, so these commands you can straight away use in your production environment. This is not going to harm your Linux operating system or your production environment. Okay, but be careful what you are executing. Before executing, you should know that what is the consequences and what is the functionality of this command, and from where, if suppose if you made a mistake, then how you can troubleshoot that one. Okay, guys, coming back to the point. Okay, so the first command to check the SCLinux mode. Okay, if you want to check at what mode correctly the SCLinux is set, so you know your SCLinux has three modes: enforcing, permissive, and disable, right? So if you want to check at this by default which mode it is set, then just do get enforce, correct? So if you can see it's set to enforcing mode. Okay, if you want to see the status, okay, or there is also one command called set status. Sorry, SC status. Okay, So here also you can see the same thing. Either you can see this value it's taking from which file, this value it's taking from this file, right? From this file, right? From this file, correct? If I not wrong, guys. But if you want to see if in a detailed kind of a thing, then just do sc status, SCLinux status. So it will be telling it is enabled and it is SCLinux mounted on SCLinux directory. Current mode is enforcing, right? It is enabled. Okay. So what is the policy version? Your policy version is 24. Now the second thing, if you want to display the SCLinux context of a file or directory, how we can do that one? Okay, so just do ls. Okay, so if you want to display, okay, if you want to display the context of a file, the syntax is ls, okay, hyphen capital Z, okay, and do enter. So this is what, because see, same thing we need to set it in FTP server. In coming sessions, when I'll be explaining how you need to configure all FTP server configuration, so there you need to set these values. So how you need to check? First thing is how you are going to display the context of a file, or a syntax is, the syntax is ls hyphen z. So you need to see. So it's telling you what all this, correct? So in a detailed way it is setting. Now what you need to do is, suppose select any file over here. Suppose you are selecting file 2, okay, and and just do a ls hyphen capital Z, okay, and do file 2. So you can see it's telling unconfined u underscore u colon object r admin home ts0 file 2. Okay, now the next thing is displaying the SELinux context of a process. Okay, to display the context of a process running in the system, the syntax is, okay, ps-ef, okay, and pipe and grep, okay, and you need to give the service name. So suppose here I have installed vs I have installed VSFTPD. VSFTPD is a service. Okay. So you can clearly see it's showing me with the with what? Correct? Or you can check with STTP. Okay. Sorry. My bad. So you need to give it like that. EFZ. Then it will be giving you all those values. So now you can see unfind, same thing it's displaying with a PID also, right? You can see the process ID. This is the process primary process ID and this is the child process ID with the value, this thing with the SELinux values. Okay. Now coming to the next command. Okay, so what is the next command we need to understand is, so changing the SCLinux context of a file. So you know this is the SCLinux context of a file, right? If you want to change this value, if you want to change the context of a file, the steps are, first same thing you need to do, correct, ls hyphen ldz. Okay, just no just do a ls hyphen ldz and the file name. If I do ls hyphen ld capital Z and the file name, what is the file name? The file name is file 2. So here you already come to know what is the context of a file called file 2 for SCLinux. If you want to change this value, how we can change this value? Because you need to change this value same way we need to do in FTP server. So observe the type is admin home, correct? If you can see that, observe if the type is admin home underscore t, right? So let's change this to public context. So see, so there is a policy I said, right? For SCLinux there is a policy. Okay. So you need to make this admin to public. Okay. So that it will be available for all the users. If you are going to make it admin, so this file is not be available for all the users, Okay, so you won't be able to access this file if you won't be able to upload this file from from even in the FTP server. So what you need to do is you need to change this value to public. Okay, how we can change this value to public? So to change the value to public, you need to type chcon, okay, hyphen t, okay, and then you need to give public, okay, underscore content, because you are changing the context, right, of that file, underscore t, okay, and the file name. What is your file name? What is your file name? Your file name is file2. Correct, guys? If I'm not wrong. Done. Now do same command, ls hyphen ld capital Z and your file2. Correct. Now you can see the value is changed from admin home to public, right? So now done. To change the context for a directory and its content, check the context for both the directory and its content. Same way only you can do it for the directory as well. Okay, so I have shown you. So this is a task for you. This is an assignment for you. I have done it. If you face any problem, any queries, you can send me your questions in that same first session. I'll be answering to that one as soon as possible. Okay, guys, getting my point? Now, coming to the point, okay, how we can restoring back the modified SCLinux context to its default value. Okay, if you want to restore the modified or change the SCLinux context to a default value, how we can do that one? So what you need to do is ls hyphen ld z and file2. Correct. Now this file you need to restoring back to the modified SCLinux context to its default value. How we can do that? So the command for that one is restore, okay, restore con, restore con, that's it, and hyphen v and your file name, enter. Now you can see now the value is again changed. Correct. Now you can see now once you're done with this one, again run the command ls ld z. Now see it's again back to the default value. You no need to do the same thing. Correct, guys? Getting my point? Understanding my point? Now we are coming to the point. So this is all about the access of a file which we need to change from the admin to a public. Okay, so every user can access. Now how we can change the modes of SELinux? Okay, so this is the question normally asked in the interviews as well as in your RHCS exam. How we can change the modes of SELinux? So what we need to do is to change the modes of SELinux, you need to do a set enforce value. Either you can do a set enforce equal to 0, okay, or you can edit the file straight away. So you know if you do get enforce, okay, enforce, so you know it's in enforcing mode. Okay, so if you want to set the value either to 0 or 1, so 0 is nothing but it's a permissive mode and 1 is nothing but it's a enforcing mode. So as of now it's in enforcing mode, so we want to set it to permissive mode. So how we can set it to permissive mode? So set enforce, okay, and you need to give the value 0, okay, enter. So now it is set to permissive mode. Okay, and how we can verify this one? So you need to do SC status, right? So now you can see SCLinux is, so now you can see SCLinux is enabled and it has to be set to permissive mode. Earlier it was set to enforcing mode, right? Correct, guys, if I'm not wrong. Now to change the SCLinux mode back to enforcing mode, what we need to do is we need to make it to 1, correct, and just check the status. Now you can see it's in enforcing mode, right? So this is how we can change the value for from enforcing to permissive mode. So what is the other way? This is a temporary kind of a thing. So you need to, once the system will be rebooted, okay, so chances will be that it will be again into enforcing mode. But in the in my suggestion, this is the recommendation. You should edit the actual file. So which is the actual file we need to edit is vim slash etc. Either you can, if vim doesn't work, then use vi editor. Okay, what is the file name called? SCLinux and config file. This is actual file, correct guys? So you can see SCLinux is set to enforcing. So what we need to do is we need to set it to permissive mode. Okay, so let's set it to permissive mode. How we can set it to from or either if you want to disable, then you can use disable command straight away. So here the thing is permissive mode. Okay, so once you done with this one, just save this file. Okay, okay, and just do sc status. So you can see it's still in enforcing mode. So no, the mode is enforcing mode. So you need to restart the service. Init dot d. Let's see. Restart. So no need. So you need to reboot the system. Even in the exam also you need to reboot the VM, then only it will be affected. Okay. Now coming to the next point. Okay. What will be the next point? So next point is very much important because I have explained you the previous thing, that is for your files, right? Which we have done it, right? From the admin we have set it to public. Now we need to set a boolean value, okay, and modifying it. How we can check the checking the boolean and modifying it for a SCLinux. To see the boolean for a particular service, the syntax is get bool, okay, hyphen a pipe grep, okay. Suppose you are checking for FTP, okay. So there is nothing for FTP over here, okay. No, the command is wrong. Get sc bull. Okay. Now you are here. You can see that FTP is, if your FTP is configured, then fine. Otherwise, you can see if you do get sc bull hyphen a grep FTP. So here I have already configured the FTP server for this Linux terminal one. Okay. So ideally, what will be the situation? This particular value, allow f and d anonymous write should be off, okay, and this you need to make it as a off for SELinux. If you want to upload any file by to a FTP server from a FTP client, then this has to be on at all the time. Otherwise, you'll be getting an error called so you'll be getting a common error, which will be I'll be explaining in the next how to configure FTP server in that one. Okay. So if you want to set this value on and off, so you need to do straight away set, okay, sc bool, and take this value, okay. If you want to set it to off, just make it as a off. So now you can see it's in off, right? So what ideally the recommendation is, you need, if you are setting up your FTP server, then in the FTP server this value has to be on, then only you can upload a file to FTP server. Okay guys, getting my point? So now you can check the value again, correct? So you can see this one. So this is all about the SC Linux. uh, for a Linux operating system. So thank you for watching this video, guys. If you have any issues, any queries, you can write it down in the comment section and send it back to me. I'll be answering to those questions. Thank you.